Once the identity built around work begins to dissolve, a profound shift occurs. You no longer seek a job to define you. You no longer look for a role to shape your contribution. Instead, you find yourself gravitating toward expressions of consciousness, natural extensions of who you already are. At this stage, the boundary between life and work dissolves. Not because you are working more or because your work has taken over your life, but because the inner split that once required you to be someone different in different environments simply disappears. You become the same self everywhere. Your presence becomes the expression. Your state becomes the offering. Your life becomes the work, not through effort, but through coherence. What it actually means for life and work to dissolve is this. When consciousness expands, the idea of switching between selves no longer makes sense. You stop toggling between the self at home, the self in public, the self in your spiritual life, the self in your work life. The inner fragmentation dissolves. Integrity, meaning wholeness, is restored. When this happens, work stops being a compartment of life and becomes a continuous expression of your presence. You are no longer performing a function. You are moving through the world in alignment, and everything you touch reflects your state. This is not fusion through force. It is integration through awareness. You may embody several roles simultaneously. What follows are not fixed job descriptions or rigid categories. They are fluid archetypes, lenses through which consciousness expresses itself. You may embody many of them at once, shift between them over time, or activate different aspects depending on your environment. The point is not to identify with them, but to recognize how your inner state naturally expresses externally. Regardless of the form, roles where life and work dissolve share 4 universal qualities. They are rooted in presence, not performance. Impact comes from your state, not your output. They allow full authenticity. No persona, no mask, no modulation of truth. They express consciousness rather than identity. You do not play a role. The role becomes an extension of your being. They generate energy rather than drain it. These roles feel like flow. They nourish you even as you give. These qualities form the foundation for all transcendent expressions of work. Below are the primary archetypes that emerge when being replaces identity. These are not professions, they are states in motion. A steady field that awakens clarity in others. This guide does not lead through expertise or authority, but through regulation, attunement, and awareness. Their presence becomes a mirror. Their calm becomes medicine. Their clarity becomes a tuning fork for those they serve. They don't provide answers. They create the space where others access their own. Expression through art, writing, story, insight. This archetype creates not to impress or perform, but to express truth. Their work becomes writing that awakens, art that reorders, content that feels alive, teaching that emerges from lived wisdom. Creation becomes an extension of presence, effortless, natural, inevitable. A stabilizing force who regulates the field. This individual doesn't need a role or a title. Their frequency does the work. They bring grounding, coherence, calm, energetic integrity, a stable nervous system. Where they go, environments shift not because of what they do, but because of what they are. Leadership as integrity, not authority. This leader influences without domination and directs without force. They lead through emotional clarity, non-reactivity, humility, spaciousness, alignment. Leadership arises through embodiment, not strategy. A midwife for evolution in people, systems, or communities. The steward does not impose structure, they elevate it. They carry awareness carefully, move intentionally, and honor timing. They do not claim the work. They hold the work. Building offerings as fields of consciousness. Here, business is no longer a pursuit of growth, profit, or status. It becomes a living expression of essence. Every program, offering, or creation is designed to elevate those who encounter it. The business becomes a transmission, a field, not a funnel. A presence that teaches more than the words. A true teacher is not teaching. They are embodying. They transmit through stillness, clarity, resonance, a life lived in alignment. Their students learn from who they are, not from what they say. The nervous system as sanctuary. The healer's work is not in technique, but in embodied coherence. Their groundedness becomes medicine. Their calm becomes permission. Healing flows through them naturally, not as an act, but as a presence. A perceiver of patterns, symbols, truths. The visionary lives in an ongoing conversation with insight. Their existence is a constant unfolding of awareness, which becomes their contribution. A being whose existence teaches. A sage expresses the highest form of life as work. There is no distinction between their presence and their legacy. Their being becomes the teaching. Their life becomes the scripture. Many misunderstand this level and assume it implies burnout, overwork, obsession, over-identification with purpose, lack of boundaries, disappearing into service. But transcendent work is the opposite. Life becoming the work is not working all the time, sacrificing yourself, losing personal space, being always on, confusing productivity with value, merging your identity with your output, abandoning rest, play, or humanity. Life becoming the work is being the same person everywhere, integrating your inner and outer world, expressing truth without fragmentation, allowing presence to be your contribution, living in alignment so deeply that your life teaches for you, finding that your work gives energy rather than takes it. Burnout comes from ego. Boundlessness comes from performance. Obsession comes from fear. But life as work arises only from coherence, which is effortless, stable, and regenerative. When the ego dissolves, identity softens. When identity softens, presence expands. When presence expands, contribution becomes inevitable. You no longer seek validation, chase outcomes, perform a persona, maintain a role, force influence, push impact. You express. You serve. You stabilize. You create. You lead. You transmit. Presence becomes the method. Awareness becomes the message. Being becomes the work. This is transcendent contribution, the work beyond work.